bringing the people behind our food to life.
There's 2 to 3 clusters of fruit right there. There's 2 to 3 clusters of fruit right there. I consider myself something of a horticulturist, and I write about it, and I just like to learn and see what's out in the world there. I've got things growing here that I've started from seed, and when you watch a plant start from a seed and grow all the way up through into bearing, you gain a completely different understanding of it than you do if you walk to a nursery and buy a tree and stick it in the ground, and you don't get to follow all the phases of it. I first started when I was about 11 or 12 years old. We'd always had gardens in the family, and my folks knew that I liked fruit, so they let me plant fruit trees and so forth. And about that time, one of my father's patients brought in some plants that they had started off with their grapevines and gave them to us. And I planted those. Now that was important because up to that time, most of the grapes you'd find around the area would be Concord or Niagara, and they didn't give me those varieties. They gave me Campbell Early, Seneca, Diamond, and Golden Muscat. Well, the vineyard is up in the front. And because of those 4, I realized that there was a lot more out there than just Concord and Niagara, and that began to make me more curious about, well, what was there in grapes available? Because certainly these were a lot different than just the stuff in the grocery store. I'm very glad that the weather's going back to cool again, because it'll give me a little more time to get these things made. Eventually I wound up going to Oregon State and got a bachelor's in horticulture, and one of my professors directed me to Dr. Harold Romo, who was a grape breeder at the University of California, Davis. When I started wandering through the student vineyard and being able to taste and just to see what was out there in summer was a whole education by itself. I mean, I think I learned more from the field crew than I did from my technical courses there. And I just decided that if I wrote anything, I was going to write it in the hands-on fashion, to tell people, here's what you need to do, here's why you do it, and here's the kind of results you can expect. One peculiarity of pruning is that if you want to encourage a spur or a shoot, you prune it very short. The reason is that the longer you prune it, the more fruit buds will be there, and they will take energy from it. So if you got one that's weak and you want to encourage it, you prune it down to 1 bud, and then that 1 bud doesn't have much fruit, and it'll throw most of its energy there into the shoot itself, and you'll get a better result. I wrote The Grape Grower because I had been writing little pieces of it without realizing for some years. People would write me asking questions, and I'd send them to this book or that book or whatever, and nothing was complete enough. So I'd write a little paper of something, and I'd make copies of it and send it to them. And I realized this was going to take me forever at that rate, so at some point I had started writing for magazines. It took me a little while, but pretty soon I got the hang of it to the point where I was selling everything I could write. In time I realized that I've been doing enough writing now, why don't I start working on a book? And then I won't have to answer questions anymore. And boy, was I wrong. Now here's one that's up here where I could use it as a fruiting cane. So it's not the biggest, but it's got enough buds and it's healthy. When you write it down, apparently that stimulates everybody to start thinking in variations of the things that you ask, and they have to call and find out what it is or write letters, and suddenly you're, in quotes, the expert, and so then you get bombarded with about 10 times more questions than you started out with. The only advantage of it is that it gives me a lot of material to think about for a possible new edition, but it didn't end the questions, it just multiplied them.